Hey everybody, welcome to another tutorial video here at tylerduprey.com. Today we're going to be doing a simple page layout with Flexbox. So thanks to the introduction of Flexbox, page layout has become a lot easier. You can do a lot more with a lot less code. And so what we're going to be creating today is a page layout that has a header, a footer, and a main content area. And that main content area is going to hold its shape no matter how little content is actually in the page. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. If you want to get a refresher on Flexbox, check out the links below this video. I linked to a premium tutorial that you guys can take a look at to learn a little bit more about Flexbox and go from knowing nothing about it to being able to use it in a project. So otherwise, let's just jump in and see how this goes. All right, so here I am in CodePen. If you guys don't have a CodePen account, it is free. Just go to codepen.io and sign up and create a new pen here. In order to get this view, I went up here to change view and I picked this more vertical view. You can I think it's more horizontal by default, but I like the vertical view here. So, all right, so let's go ahead and begin by putting our HTML elements in. I'm going to start with a page wrap. This is going to wrap all of the code inside of our page. And the reason I do this is because you don't want to be applying layout styles directly to the body, just because you never know what the user is going to have as far as plugins or settings in their browser that could also affect the body. And so I just like to do all of my styling inside of a page wrap. So let's go ahead and put our main content in here. I'm going to put in a header. I'm going to put in a footer. And then I'm also going to put in a div here that I'm going to call content wrap. Okay, so inside of the div, that's where I'm going to put my main tag for our main content. And I'm going to put in a side tag for the sidebar content. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do in my CSS here, first I'm going to get rid of this JavaScript section because we're not going to use JavaScript for this project. And I'm going to expand the CSS here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the body and I'm just going to make sure there's no extra margin or padding on there. So margin 0, padding 0, easy enough. Now I want to grab, we can't really see the content in the page, so actually let me add some more HTML here. I'm going to add some content in the header. I'm just going to add an H2 that says header. Nothing too creative. In the footer, I'm going to add another H2 that says footer. Oops. And then inside the main, let's add another H2. Call it main content. And then inside the aside, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to call this main sidebar. There we go. As you can see, everything is stacked on top of each other here. There's no spacing other than the default margin at the top and bottom. And the footer up here floats at the top of the page instead of being pushed down to the bottom where you would think the footer would be. Also, the main content, this section takes up as much space as the content inside of it. In this case, it's the H2. And so what we want is we want the main content to kind of take up most of the page as well. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to grab the page wrap inside of my CSS and I'm going to apply some styles to that. So I'm going to give it a, let's see, I'm going to give it a minimum height of 100 viewport height and a min width of 100%. It's going to be 100% by default. But that's just in case we're gonna make sure that that's 100% width. And so now we know our page wrap is taking up 100% of the page, and we can even see that it's created a scroll bar here because of the default padding and margin with the H2s. It's actually created a little bit more than 100% of the viewport height. We do want the page wrap to be displayed as a flex item. So let me go ahead and say display flex. So this is a flex container now. And we want to do flex direction column. So everything's laid out stacked on top of each other. And now you can see I got rid of the scroll bar because the margin padding is no longer affecting it. It's one of the characteristics of it being a flex container. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this footer is always pushed down to the bottom of the page like you would expect it to be, even when there's no content in the page itself. So that's what we're going to do here. And in order to do that, what I actually want is I want the content wrap, this middle section here that has all the main page content. Since it's a flex item, I can actually give it the property of flex1, and it should take up the available content on the page. And now you can see that. You have your header up here where you'd expect it to be. Your footer is now pushed down here to the bottom of the page. Now I don't like that this content is butting up against the left side of the page here, so I'm going to fix that with a container class. So let's go ahead and add a div inside of the header, and I'm going to give it the class container. Save that, and then let's put our header in there. And we're going to do the same thing with the footer. Yeah, let's just go ahead and give it the div with the class container. And we're going to copy and paste our content in that. And then for the content wrap, I can just add the class container to that. So for the container, what I want to do, give it a margin of 0 and auto so that it's centered by default. Give it a width of 90% so that it creates some space there. Now you can see we have some space here on the left side. It'd be 5% of space on the left and 5% of space on the right, thanks to the margin 0 auto. And then just so the content doesn't get too wide, I want to give it a max width. And I just pick a number that I like, but I like 1260 pixels. Okay, so it's never going to get wider than 1260 pixels. Otherwise, it's going to be 90% and it's going to be centered on the page. So that makes all of our content look really nice. Just so we can see it, the elements better on the page, I'm going to give them some styles just so we can kind of see how everything is laying out here. So this is strictly just to make the project look a little nicer and be able to see what we're doing here. So first, let's grab the header. Actually, let me go back up. Let me go back up to here. Let's grab page wrap. Let's give it a background color. I'm going to give it ever so slight shade in order to kind of push it visually back into the background. And so now it's just ever so slight gray. You probably can't even notice it, but it's just a subtle way to kind of push the background backward to make it look like it is the background. And so now when we add a background color to the header of pure white, you can kind of see how the header is now white, and it kind of makes it look visually like there's more light on it, and therefore it looks visually like it's pulled forward a little bit more and sitting on top of the background. And we can exaggerate this effect with a simple box shadow. So let's go ahead and add a box shadow. And I have a box shadow saved here. You can use whatever box shadow you want, or you can pause the video and copy mine. But that's my box shadow. And as you can see, it just exaggerates the effect of this header sitting on top of the background, pulls it forward visually. And yeah, I just think that generally looks nice. For the footer, I'm just going to give it, here, let's just give the footer a subtle background color of pure white, and that kind of pulls it forward very subtly, which is fine. And so now for our content, let's grab, again, this main sidebar really should be pushed down to the bottom of the page on smaller screens. It will be a true sidebar on wider screens, but on smaller screens, we want it to be pushed down to the bottom of the page, and we want the main content to take up the bulk of the page when there isn't a lot of content in there. And so by default, we want this main sidebar to be pushed down. And so we're actually going to use the same technique. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make my content wrap here also a Flexbox item, or I should say also a Flexbox container. It is a Flexbox item, but it can be a container as well. And so we're going to do flex direction column. And then now we can add that flex1. I'm going to add it. Yeah, let's add it here. So add it to our content wrap. Let's give it a flex of 1. And that didn't work. Let me see what I did wrong here. Content. Yeah, okay. What we want to do is give the main a flex 1. Sorry about that. There we go. So now the main is by default taking up the majority of the page, regardless of how much content is actually in the page. And just so we can see the main and the sidebar a little better, let's add some styles to that because I'm having trouble seeing that. So for the main, I'm going to give it a background color. And I've saved a background color here. You guys can use whatever color you want or copy mine. And the text is a little hard to see with that background color. So let's add a color, text color of white. And then we need a little bit of padding in there because our text is touching the edges. So let's do, let's try 0.5 rem on the top and, or I'm sorry, let's try 1 rem on the top and bottom and 0.5 rem on the sides. You know, I think I had it right the first time. Let's do 0.5 rem and 1 rem. There we go. That looks better. Now the main content is touching the header here and we don't want that. So let's come up to our content wrap and let's give it a margin. Top and bottom margin of 1 rem. Oh, we don't want 0 on the sides. Here, this is what we'll do. Margin top 1 rem. Margin bottom 1 rem. There we go. Just gives it a little bit of spacing. Okay, so now for the sidebar, let's give it a background color so that we can see it as well. So for the aside, again, I've saved a background color over here. And it's going to also need a text color of white. There we go. And we want to give it the same padding. Here, let's take this padding roll. And then let's grab both the main and the aside together down here. And let's add the padding in there. That way they both have the same padding, and then you change it once, you don't have to change it on both. And I don't like that the sidebar is touching the main content here, so let's give the aside a top margin. There you go. Our viewport layout, our narrow viewport layout looks really good here. If this were a phone, we'd have our header here. We'd have our main content here, which by default is taking up the majority of the space. And we have our main sidebar here and our footer down below. So this looks really good. I think what we want to do now is try to see what this is going to look like on larger screens where this main sidebar comes up and pops over to the right here. So let's go ahead and add in a media query for larger screens. Oops. So we'll say at media screen and we're going to do min width. And let's do it for desktop screen. So I'm going to do 1024 pixels, about the size of your average desktop. And for this, let's pull our viewport out so we can see what this is going to look like. For this, I want to grab the content wrap, which has both our main and side in it. And the first thing I'm going to do is paste it down here and give it a flex direction of row. There we go. Wasn't quite wide enough there. So now that we're on a desktop screen, we can see that it's popping over to the side. We have some styling issues here. We don't want the margin top on the sidebar. Let me create a little more room here so this doesn't get too messy. Let's grab the aside again. Let's remove that top margin. We don't need it anymore. But then we do need a margin on the left of 1 rem, just to give it some room there. And there you go. Now you have a nice sidebar. Now it does seem like it's a little too thin to me. Let's give it a width of 25% of the viewport. There you go. Now it looks like a true sidebar. It's taking up 25%. By default, because of that Flex 1 styling, this main is going to take up the majority or what's left of the page. And so it's going to be about 3/4 of the page, while this is going to be about 1/4 of the page, thanks to this width being 25%. Now I don't want it to get too narrow on smaller screens, the sidebar I mean. So I'm just going to make sure it doesn't by doing a min width of, I don't know, let's say 300 pixels and see. And actually, let me try making that 200. Yeah, I like 200 better. Alright, so it's never going to get lower than 200 pixels. Okay, so now you can see we've created pretty much most of our layout here. We have a nice sidebar. It's responsive. It takes up, it holds its shape even when there's not a lot of content in there. Let's try adding some content. I'm going to grab some what's called lorem ipsum, which is just dummy text that's made to look like any Latin-based language. And so let's grab some lorem ipsum here. I'm going to go to lipsum.com and I'm going to grab a paragraph. If you just Google lorem ipsum, you can find it. But let me go ahead and paste a paragraph in the main content, and then I'm going to paste a paragraph inside of the sidebar content just to see what content is going to look like inside of these. And there you go. I mean, everything looks really good here. Let's see what this, now that we're on smaller screens, we can see what it looks like when it gets to scrolling. And so, it scrolls just like you would think it would. You have your main content here, you have your sidebar content, and the user is able to scroll through both. And so that looks really good. Let's add some more paragraphs into the main section, the main content section, just to see, because this is usually going to have more content in it, I would think. And so let's just make sure that that all works out. Okay. So let's go down to phone screens again and just make sure everything is looking good. You can scroll through the main content here, and then down at the bottom you have your little sidebar content and your footer. That looks really good. Pull out to wider screens, and you can see that we can still scroll through the content here, and everything looks really good. Now, right before I wrap up this tutorial, I just want to show you one more thing, and I want to show you what happens when we pull the main sidebar out. Let's say we have another page based on this page, but it doesn't have a sidebar. There's no need for a sidebar. Well, let's pull that sidebar out, and then let's increase to full screen here. And as you can see, there's no sidebar anymore, and yet the main content expands to take up all the space available to it inside of its container. And so what I like about this is that we now have two different page templates, one with a sidebar and one without a sidebar, and we didn't have to change the CSS at all. And so this is really, really efficient coding. So let me put the sidebar back in there, because we do want the sidebar. There we go. And let's pull it back out. And there you go. Now we have our main sidebar template back. Okay, so hopefully you guys learned something. This is a really cool way to lay out a page. It's working for me so far. So let me know if you have any suggestions on how to improve this, or if you see any issues. Otherwise, check out the links below for more information, and I hope you keep coming back for more tutorials. Thanks.